You are listening to the Breaktime Tech Talks podcast, a bite-sized tech podcast for busy developers, where we'll briefly cover technical topics, news snippets, and more in short time blocks. I'm your host, Jennifer Reif, an avid developer and problem solver with special interest in data, learning, and all things technology. I was on the road again this week to visit the Seattle Java user group. Shout out to a fantastic and inquisitive group of people. It was a great event. There were really good questions, and I enjoyed speaking to everyone there. Next, there are many more things in the pipeline, so I'll fill you in on all the latest going on. The first up is that on Tuesday, September 16th, there were a couple of big releases. The first is for Java language version 25. And there were tons of things going on social media about all the exciting features and new things that are now here in the Java programming language. So if you're interested in checking that out, find the release or head out to whatever professional social network you might be on, and I'm sure you're able to find some things there. The other one was Langchain4j had a 1.5 release, and I just kind of skimmed a couple of things in the social post when I saw this on Tuesday, and the thing that caught my eye is there is an initial implementation for an MCP registry client. So now you can create MCP clients using Langchain4j. This is something that was available in Spring AI, and Langchain4j just hadn't added it yet, and now it's here. I'm super excited to play around with this and create applications that act as MCP clients and interact with MCP servers. So feel free to check out the release information on that as well and play around with that. I definitely will be playing with both of these things in the coming weeks. I just haven't had a chance to get there yet. The next thing is that Spring Initializer, I noticed before Tuesday actually, updated their default Java version from 17 to 21. So now if you go out to their Spring Initializer page and you start filling in details to create a new application, the automatic default for the Java version is now 21. So just be aware of this when you go out and create projects. If you're looking for a particular version, or if you had to change versions previously for something, you might need to tweak your flow a bit to add or subtract this step. Another one is I created a blog post that actually got pushed out late last week, I believe, but it's on text to Cypher with MCP. This was a lot of fun. I've done some text to Cypher with MCP before, but I really wanted to focus and narrow down the scope a bit and focus in on just the MCP and text to Cypher piece, where before I had integrated it along with some other things in my application. I created a new code repository that just has the MCP text to Cypher bits in it, and it's just a basic integration. There's not really much else code to clutter things up, so feel free to check that out if you're interested, and then of course the blog post will walk you through all of that. I also played around with a little bit of generating some embeddings in Ollama for Neo4j data. Tested this out a bit before, but really haven't dug deep on it, so I wanted to spend some time here and try to get some Ollama embeddings spun up and play around with GraphRAG solutions using Ollama to see what the solutions looked like and see if it worked for my data and so on. I'm in the process of that, but I hit a couple of road bumps along the way. The first is that the Cypher generative AI procedures don't support Ollama embeddings just yet. You can create and generate and store embeddings using some out-of-the-box Cypher procedures. However, they typically only go with OpenAI or Google's Gemini models. So they don't support Ollama. However, there is potentially work in the pipeline to add that feature. It's just not there yet. Okay, that didn't work. What's my next alternative? That's where I turn to APOC, which is Neo4j's awesome procedures on Cypher library. And APOC does support Ollama, although it doesn't specify this clearly in the documentation. You just need to tweak a couple of the parameters in the OpenAI one, because Ollama follows the OpenAI model's format for creating embeddings. You just have to modify the base URL in the APOC procedure and a couple other things, and you should be good to go here. I haven't tested this out myself, but I will be here shortly. I will keep you posted on that. Another one that I worked on this week was Spring AI Advisors. I dug really deep on this week. I'm prepping some content for a blog post, and I wanted to really dive in and figure out what are the benefits of the advisors, what are the drawbacks, what are the tips and tricks and things around this. I played around with the Q&A advisor, which works well. It's pretty standard. Nothing super graphy about it though. So if you're wanting to do GraphRAG, there's a little bit of uplift you have to do to add that. And then the Retrieval Augmentation Advisor, which is a series of RAG modules that are supposed to be composable and customizable. I hadn't really played around with this too much. In fact, when I initially saw this, I was a bit confused on how you added it in and what it did differently and why you needed that on top of the QA advisor. But after digging more on this, I really like it. So the GraphRAG Python package in Neo4j does this similar thing where you can create a customizable pipeline of certain steps that you need to enact in your GraphRAG solution. You might need to extract some data, you might need to filter it, you might need to add and subtract from it or manipulate somehow, pass data back and forth, and so on before you send the request to the large language model. And the Retrieval Augmentation Advisor is kind of a similar thing for Spring AI. However, it is, I will say, less GraphRAG friendly again. So I've noticed that Spring AI is designed very heavily toward the traditional vector database format and the properties and the schema kind of setup that a vector database moves around, but not so much for a Neo4j graph. So you kind of have to tweak some things to have it fit the Spring AI model, which again is totally fine. There isn't a current way to customize the mapping of some of the fields to the Spring AI document entity. That's really the biggest holdup. The generic document entity that they use in Spring AI is an ID, a text field, and then metadata. And so you have to format your entities in whatever database you happen to be working with in that structure, ID, text, and nested metadata, which of course is not very Neo4j or graph native. So I haven't found a good way to map those manually. So that means your data on the back end in the database has to be set up to automatically map those things. Again, this feature may be coming, or maybe it's something I've missed, but it hasn't been easily apparent to me how to do that. We also have at Neo4j our big online free conference called Nodes 2025 that is coming up in November. I will have a link for you to jump onto that if you're interested. There is tons of free, amazing content from customers and internal Neo4j folks and community members and just people all around the world doing really amazing things with graphs and data. If you're interested in checking that out, I highly recommend it. It is one of my favorite events every year. So definitely sign up for that and check out at least some of the content, even if you don't spend the full 24 hours of nonstop excitement throughout the day. I did run across a piece of content I definitely want to share here. It's called Integrating Neo4j with Langchain4j for GraphRAG Vector Stores and Retrievers. This was an article that was created by someone I've worked with on the APOC project before, someone who's very active in the community and is a really excellent resource for this type of content. And I found this blog post to be in that same vein as well. It's an amazing blog post that covers a lot of ground and helps you understand the nuts and bolts of putting together a GraphRAG solution with Neo4j and Langchain4j. Now, also, they used Spring in order to incorporate Langchain4j and Neo4j, which I found interesting. This is a common thread. People will create a Spring application, and then they'll pull in the Langchain4j library and Neo4j driver dependencies and so on, and integrate this way. And this is exactly the example that this article walks through as well. The article goes through how to store the embeddings in Neo4j. So you have data, you need to store the embeddings inside the database, and then how to retrieve those with a variety of different configurations and customizations you might need to make. It includes examples on how to add some retrieval queries alongside your vector search. So this is where the hybrid RAG or GraphRAG comes into play. You have that vector search, you need to add on a retrieval query to pull some additional data in the graph. And this article walks through that as well. This is something I do need to look at again, because the last time that I did GraphRAG and Langchain4j, I ended up doing it manually with a vector search call and then a graph retrieval call. But according to this article, it looks like you should be able to tack one to the other, kind of like in Langchain, which I found to be a really good experience there. So if Langchain4j has this now, this would be awesome. And I need to go back and update my content as well as my applications that I built a while back. There may be a nicer way to do this now. This is a little bit of a different approach than Spring AI. Langchain4j right now does feel a bit more Neo4j native. However, Spring AI and Langchain4j remain at a race, with one pulling ahead before the other takes the lead and then back again. So one is not necessarily better than the other. It kind of depends on what you're working with and how you want to integrate and the data and so on. I'm really excited that they're continuously adding features and pulling things together that make experiences for developers really nice. This was another exciting week in the books, with many more to come. This week was a lot of work around Spring AI and Neo4j, but Langchain4j made a splash with a new release and what looks like some exciting new features. The article I read also integrated all three of these tools by using a Spring application with Langchain4j and Neo4j to build a GraphRAG solution. As always, thanks for listening and happy coding.